kitchen. It is actually evening time, but I'm getting some sourdough started. So I've had a couple of questions about making sourdough. We used to share some sourdough with some neighbors of ours. I'm gonna be making some rosemary sourdough. So I just pulled my starter out of the fridge here, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. It's kind of a cake batter consistency. And from here, all I'm gonna be doing to feed this starter is adding a little bit of flour and water. I don't measure. Sourdough can really be as technical as you like to make it, and I don't like to make it technical. So I'm going to take some bread flour, that's what I've got in this big jar right here, and then just a little bit of water and add them into this jar of starter right here. So again, I just want a pancake batter consistency, and I'm just taking a couple scoops of bread flour right into the starter. And from there, this is just water that's been filtered by the fridge filter. So it's nothing special, it's not spring water or distilled water or anything complicated. And I would also use tap water from time to time if I needed to. So that's just going right into the jar. And then I'm going to just sort of just mix it up. We want, I'll say I like a thick starter, a thick consistency, because I know it's gonna be able to hold some structure when I go to add it to my bread dough. So again, this is a fed starter right here. I'm gonna sort of scrape down the sides of this jar, and then I'm going to leave the rubber band where the top of this starter is, because I want to know that this starter is active and doubling. So when I come in tomorrow morning to check this, I should see starter very close to the top of this jar. And that's how I know that this starter is active, it's ready to go. So I'm gonna leave this overnight. I am just going to pop the top on like that. This is alive, it's gonna be producing gases. These yeast are producing gases, and so I don't want this jar to explode. So whenever you leave your starter, don't screw the top on tight. Just set it on, or maybe put a cloth over the top of it, and we'll check back in the morning. All right, you guys, it's actually the next afternoon. We had some errands to run this morning, so here is the starter, and I'll show you. Bubbly, I know that it's active. It rose all the way to the top, as you saw in the time lapse. Just to let you know, this starter is yeast, flour, water. All right, so from here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some bread flour, and I'm going to add it to a mixing bowl. This is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to feel like, you know, I don't think that's gonna fit. It's not supposed to feel like a science fair project. So it's okay if you're not super technical. It's okay if you don't wanna measure and calculate. You can guesstimate if you want to. All right, so I put my bread flour in, and to this, I'm just going to add some warm water. This is straight from the sink, just lukewarm water. I'm adding to this bread flour, and I don't have a spoon, so let's see. I'm just gonna mix these two together. All right, so I would add a little at a time. You want a tacky dough. I'm not looking for a smooth dough right now. So I've got the bread flour and the water, and I'm just sort of mixing these together. Okay, it's not completely combined yet. I'm gonna go ahead and put my salt in. About 2 teaspoons. mixing and you still have a lot of flour in the bottom of your bowl, add a little bit more water. I don't want any dry pockets. This is okay, but there's still a lot of extra flour. So I'm gonna add a little bit more water. All right, and this is about the consistency that I'm going for. So from here, I'm going to just let this sit. I can cover it with a wet or a damp towel so that the dough doesn't begin to dry out. But this is the texture that I'm starting with initially. And I'm gonna let this sit for an hour and let the flour fully absorb all of the water. And as we continue to work this dough, you'll see how this changes. So I'm at home in my kitchen. I'm going to use my finger to scrape this spoon off. You can do what you want at your house. You guys, there's no rules, so just do what you want. All right, so I'm gonna leave this. Let's cover it. All right, I've got a wet cheesecloth. I use this for all sorts of things, but today we'll use it to cover this bowl. So we'll check back in an hour. The dough has been sitting for an hour, and this is what we're looking at. And from here, I'm going to take some starter and I'm going to fold it in. So a little bit more about how I do sourdough. I don't discard anything typically. When I go to bake, I will dump some of my starter into whatever it is that I'm making. And then this jar is gonna go back into the refrigerator so that I don't have the daily chore of feeding it every day. It's not something that I wanna have to keep up with every day. And so putting this jar in the refrigerator with the top on loosely, it kind of slows down this process of the yeast multiplying and producing gases and rising and all of that stuff. So I don't typically measure the amount of starter that's going into this. Again, for some people, I know this is going to be completely haphazard and it's not going to work. But if you're looking for an enjoyable way to do this without feeling like you have to measure and be super precise, the whole idea behind adding this starter is the more starter that I add to this dough, the more yeast, therefore the quicker this is going to rise and proof, because I'm adding more yeast into this with more starter. So typically just a couple of tablespoons is what I'll add into this. If you are trying to accelerate the process, one thing that you might want to try is just adding more starter. So I'm going to come in here. And if I had to guess, maybe 3 tablespoons. I've got quite a bit of starter in here, so I'm gonna scoop just a little bit more, maybe 4 tablespoons full of starter like that. And I put the top on, don't screw it, it's loose. But from here, this just goes back in my refrigerator. So this dough right here, it's got salt, it's got bread flour, it's got water, and now it's got our starter. And what I'm gonna start doing is stretching and folding it so that I can start to build that gluten connection and really work this starter throughout the dough. So what I'll typically do is take a spoon and sort of pull up and fold over the top, pull up, fold over the top. I'm gonna do this like 3 or 4 times, just rotating the bowl, going all the way around, pulling up, folding back into the top, pulling up, and back into the top. And then back into the top. I made like a little ball right here. And then I'm gonna sit this, leave it alone. And then I'm gonna come back and do that like 4 or 5 times. Just to get the gluten developed and build some elasticity in the dough. So this is just taking another break for now. So it's been about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and what I'm gonna do here is continue to stretch and fold. So I usually repeat this process, like I said, 4 or 5 times max, about 30 to 45 minutes apart. I have a bowl of water here, and I'm just gonna be using that to wet my hands. And I feel like there are a lot of different like technical names, like slap and fold, stretch and fold, whatever. I just sort of come in here with wet hands and continue the same process of pulling up. It's still breaking, so it's not where we want it to be. I'm pulling up, stretching it, and then just folding it over. The dough will become more elastic as I continue to stretch it and fold it over. Another way I've seen this process done is sort of taking the whole loaf, folding it in half, and just stretching it upward that way. I can show you how I do that. I don't have a preference as far as that goes. I'm really just trying to gain some elasticity when I come in here to stretch this dough. So just sort of fold it over, keep working it in, and then I'm gonna let it rest again for another half hour to 45 minutes. It's been sitting for, Solomon is playing with Maria on her little play mat. So that's what the squeaky noises are. But we're gonna keep going. All right, so this has been stretched and folded twice, and I told you I would show you guys another way to sort of stretch and fold this. So I always start with wet hands so the dough doesn't stick. And some people will sort of come up under the dough and lift everything like this and let it hang, and then fold it over, and then come back, lift, let it hang, and then fold it over and keep stretching it that way. And I'll tuck that in, and I'll leave this for another half hour to 45 minutes. So I'm gonna do a couple more stretch and folds on this. I'll probably set that up on a time lapse for you guys. And then this is going to sit overnight in this bowl for a bulk fermentation. The bread is proofing. I still have a couple more stretch and folds to go. We're gonna be adding some fresh rosemary and garlic tops to this bread. So I figured it would be a good time to run out to the garden and get what we need. Okay, I've got some fall planted garlic here. I do have bulbs in the freezer from a harvest a while back, but I figured it'd be nice to use some of these greens. So I am going to cut some of these, and then we're going to do rosemary as well. All right, I am actually waiting for a new tripod to get here, so I'm going to have to do this one-handed. I'm just gonna cut a couple from a different plant. This is an opportunity to wing it and create and have fun being in production. I know it's a lengthy process, but that's okay. Many of the processes that we go through are rushed and from point A to point B. So sourdough for me is just an opportunity to slow down and make something at home and enjoy something homemade and try some new things. I've got dough on the back of my hand still. I don't feel like I need a whole ton of this. We'll take more. Oops, got pine straw. All right, so Here are the herbs for our bread. And I'll snip off some of those browning ends. Like a neat little ball here. And so from here, I'm just going to let this ferment. It's gonna sit on the counter overnight. I'm gonna cover it with this damp cheesecloth. And this dough is going to start to rise and bubble similar to what the starter did. In the morning, I'm gonna uncover it, and then we're just gonna pop it in the fridge long enough to chill the dough before we bake. The dough rose overnight. This is what we have now. And I'm gonna go ahead and dump this onto the counter and add our rosemary and garlic and show you guys how I go about just sort of shaping the dough and pulling it together. All right, so I'm gonna try to pull this wide. Maybe do this. And from here, you know what? I probably should have flipped this. I wonder if I can. That might be tricky. Okay. And from here, I'm gonna add, I sort of use the mortar and pestle to grind this rosemary so it could sort of release oils and everything, so that's why it's looking a little not green. These garlic tops. We've always got little ones with us, so that's my sweet little niece. Okay, so that's how I add the inclusions, whatever you're adding. It could be a jalapeno and cheddar, or garlic, berries, lemon, whatever. And then from here, I kind of did this sideways, but I wet this dough scraper for the same reason I was wetting my hands earlier, so the dough doesn't stick. And I'm gonna come up under this and kind of tuck it over. And you guys, this doesn't have to be professional level shaping, right? We're not getting paid to make sourdough. So we have the freedom of just doing this for fun, which is nice. And then I'm just gonna sort of roll all of this over. Okay, so right here I have a pretty good shape, I think, by my standards. And then I'm gonna sort of just fold these edges in. My hands are a little bit wet, but not drenched. And I'm gonna start tucking and rolling. And I'm not adding any flour or a whole lot of water because I want the traction of this dough on the counter. It kind of makes it easier to slide across. So I'm sort of tucking and roll, tucking and roll. Tucking under and rolling. Okay. Oh, I did forget to mention, after proofing this on the counter, letting it rise, which I showed you guys in the time lapse, we just popped it into the fridge for a couple of hours to cool the dough. I do that because I find that I get a better rise in the oven when I cool the dough ahead of time. but I've done it without pulling the dough before and it works. So whatever you have time for. All right, so this dough here is good enough for me. So I'm gonna set that there, and then I feel like maybe most people have a cast iron skillet. Dutch oven is usually recommended, like enamel pots or something like that, but you can definitely bake in a cast iron skillet. So that's what I'm gonna use today because I like the rise that I get with an open top, and I'm thinking maybe more people might have a cast iron skillet. So this is rice flour, white rice flour, and I'm just coating the bottom of this skillet kind of heavily with the rice flour, and that's to prevent the bread from sticking to the bottom of the pan. You can also sort of dust the top of your loaf with this. I find this is kind of nice before scoring. I think it sort of dries out the top of the dough where there's already some tension. So this is scored, this is coated, got a little bubble right there. And your pan is coated so that nothing's going to stick. From here, we're gonna put the loaf into our skillet, and then it's going to go into, I start off at 450 degrees because I'm not putting a top on this, I'm gonna do 450 for about 10 minutes. If I were using a Dutch oven and putting a top on, then I'd hold it at 450 degrees for 20 minutes. I come in, I take the top off, and I bump the temp down to 400 degrees for 30 minutes. So you can sort of play around with that. But I'm going to transfer this dough into the pan or into the skillet, scoop it up, place it in like that. And from here, I'm just gonna score the top. This is a bread lane. You could also use like just a razor blade, box cutter, anything like that. People like to get fancy and make this artful, which is fun. I'm not gonna do that today. I'm just gonna sort of take this and score right down the middle. A lot of people go for an ear. I don't have to have that. You know, if it happens, that's cool, but not something that's mandatory for me. So this is going into the oven, and we'll see what happens when we pull it out. All right, here we are. Loaf is in the oven. And let's take the bread out. Okay, there's our loaf. We've got a little bit of a blowout over here, but it's still edible. It's bread. Not a big deal. So I'm gonna let this cool for a few hours, and then we will cut into it. All right, so here's the loaf. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this open. As you can see, it's not rock hard. Okay, so I cut with a serrated knife. Let's see what the inside looks like. So there we have it. I'm pretty happy with this crumb. It's still just a little bit warm. Not too bad. Excited to taste this. Probably could have added more garlic. I was worried it was going to be too much, but it's folded in throughout, so I'll cut some slices soon. The loaf is out, and I just wanted to add some final motivation if you're thinking about trying sourdough. We made this loaf without measuring flour, without measuring water. I don't know what the ratio was when I went to feed my starter. I used a metal spoon. I didn't use a Dutch oven. All of the things that people are told they have to do this and you have to do that. And there's so many rules around just making a loaf of bread that it can become, you know, pretty intimidating or just so overwhelming that you don't even want to bother. And I wanted to make this loaf just to show you guys that it doesn't have to be a super complicated process. Yeah, we had a little bit of a blowout in the back of the loaf, but it's going to taste just the same. And for me, sourdough isn't about, you know, reenacting Little House on the Prairie or being super trendy. I enjoy the process of creating. I enjoy taking time to make something, trying something new, and it's an opportunity to give yourself permission to figure something out, learn something new, make a mistake, and move on. Enjoy something that you had a hand in producing, and bread is always super yummy. I know this process can also be lengthy, and for those of us who are used to things that are quick and easy, this is not always necessarily a quick and easy process, and that's okay. If you are not someone who is working from home and say you have to leave home for work every day, this can be condensed down a bit. I would just start the process earlier in the day. So when I went to feed my starter, it was sort of on a whim. My sister was here, and so we started at night. But if you feed your starter earlier in the morning, give it a couple hours to rise, set that dough aside so that the flour can fully absorb the water, and start that stretch and fold process. You can really do the first half of this in one day and then wake up the next morning and pop your loaf in the oven. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that you have enough confidence to give sourdough a try. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Bye.